Now it's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What are you people? On dope?
Where you can toke.
I inhale frequently.
Or you can talk.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
Or you can toke and talk.
10 federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
While we talk about toke on Toker Talk Radio.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, you know, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
Live from beautiful Portland, Oregon at Rolla J Studios.
Hey, this is great.
Just not cannabis.
Plus your calls live at 971-533-7111.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel? Gateway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Holland, is it real? Don't tease me.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years.
And now, here's your host, the guru of ganja graphics, the sultan of sativa statistics, and the worst nightmare of a reefer mad prohibitionist. A polite, perspicacious, productive pothead with a propensity for PowerPoint. Radical Russ Belville.
All right, welcome back, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It's hour 2. We made it all the way to hour 2 today. Looking out the window off the 26th floor of the South Waterfront. The sky has cleared just a little bit, and Mount Hood stands majestically in the distance. Really a beautiful skyline up here in Portland, I gotta say. We're supposed to be approaching some 80-degree days over the next couple of days, so I came back to Portland just in time to enjoy some of what makes it wonderful. And that's when the sun comes out and it gets all warm by the banks of the Willamette River. Looking forward to it. It'll be a nice way to relax after these last couple of days, and I want to apologize to the listeners out there, especially the live listeners, with the difficulties I've been having on the system here these past couple of days. You know, this has been tough. Because, as you know, I had my home studio, Rolla J Studios, and now I'm getting divorced, and so I don't have a home studio anymore. It's actually, Rolla J Studios is set up at Herb Thrasher's place. It's now the 420 radio studio. So all 3 of my desktop computers and all 4 monitors are all set up at Herb's place. And I've had to transition everything to this mobile studio, which consists of a laptop and a USB mixer and a recorder. And it's been tough trying to get everything to, you know, fit on one screen and swap between different applications. Plus, there was virtual audio drivers that I had to install. A virtual audio cable to get the Liebermator to talk to the Spreaker, to talk to, you know, you don't care. But anyway, a lot of stuff, a lot of details to hook up between this, between that. And over the past couple of months, I finally gotten it dialed in, where it's working just great. And then came, you know, the fact that, well, I can't keep this laptop. I got to give it back to Portland Normal. It's a Portland Normal laptop, right? So I went and got another laptop, and I scrubbed the first laptop, the one I've been using. I scrubbed it, wiped it, you know, factory reset, because I'm going to give it back, you know, to its owners. So I started setting up the new laptop, and the new laptop was kind of slow, and it wasn't working, and there was all sorts of problems with it. And I'm panicking like, oh my God, I got this new laptop. It's not going to work for what I'm doing. And so then we got to talking about it and said, well, why don't we just gift the new laptop over and keep the old laptop with me? And I'm like, well, that's great. That's a great idea. Except now I've got to rebuild this laptop. So that's where we're at right now, is I've been rebuilding this laptop for the past weekend and trying to get everything reinstalled and reconfigured. And as you can tell, there's still some things that weren't quite reconfigured. So now they are, and I hope this sounds better from here on out, and I intend it to. Anyway, for the rest of this hour, we are going to talk more about the fallacies of marijuana prohibitionists, as demonstrated by the 2 is Enough DC account today on Twitter, where we went over this his reasoning here for why alcohol prohibition and marijuana prohibition aren't comparable. And I'll actually agree. Alcohol prohibition was far less draconian than marijuana prohibition ever could be, right? Far less draconian. You didn't have cops breaking down citizens' doors and shooting their pets and taking everybody's stuff and throwing everyone in prison during alcohol prohibition. During alcohol prohibition, it was mostly dumping out casks of beer and whiskey into the streets, into the gutters, and locking up gangsters and kingpins. So, nothing alike. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in just 2 minutes with more marijuana prohibition fallacies right after this.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
How high do you like your profit margin? CannabisRadio.com.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
Tommy Chong Show on Cannabis Radio. You know, about this podcast, what I really want to do from now on is to solve world problems. I feel like my job is to calm everybody down and focus on how we can save this planet.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals, or at least they pay me to say that. A public service message from CannabisRadio.com and the Russ Belville Show.
Are you playing an acoustic guitar but want to be louder without an amp? Try a resonator guitar. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic and other resonators, square necks and round necks. Stop by the fingerboard extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. Go wild hog in the woods.
Remember, friends, there's more to life than marijuana. I just can't remember what it is. Why'd I come in here? This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Approaching 9 after the hour here. It's been a fun show today. We spoke with Chris Thompson from Freedom Leaf, discussing the normal membership drive. You can find out more at freedomleaf.com/normal. And my apologies to Chris because of the trouble we had with the live feed. A lot of folks didn't hear the first part of our interview, so we made sure to repeat things as much as we could once we had the connection taken care of. But I think everything's dialed in now. I don't think I'm going to have to make any other major changes. Cross my fingers. I think this is it. But let's go back to what we were talking about in the rant, and that is this 2 is enough DC. And again, 2 is enough referring to 2 legal drugs is enough. Can't have a third legal drug. My God, that would be terrible because 3 is greater than 2, and therefore it's bad. It's always a weird argument, isn't it, that we legalize the 2 worst drugs there are. Objectively speaking, there is no denying that tobacco and alcohol are the 2 worst drugs there are. And not just because they're legal. That's where they like to, Kevin Sabet and the Project Sam acolytes like 2 is enough here. They like to try to steer that to say, well, yeah, because they're legal and so many more people use them. That's why there's so many deaths, there's so many more people using them. No. On a case-by-case, person-by-person basis, take one person, give them alcohol to excess, take another person, give them heroin to excess. Alcohol's the worst drug. Long-term and short-term. Alcohol can kill you, just as heroin can. Alcohol withdrawals can kill you, just as heroin can. Alcohol's really addictive and reinforcing on that addiction. So is heroin. Nicotine actually has a higher addictive potential than heroin does. More people who try nicotine actually get addicted to it than people who try heroin. So this isn't even an argument about whether or not it's safer or it's more dangerous because more people are using it. And even if that were the case, even if we did have as many people, half the country drinks, over half the country drinks. Even if we had over half the country smoking pot on a regular basis, you would not see the devastation, even 100th of the devastation that you see from alcohol use, even 1,000th of the devastation you see from alcohol use. It wouldn't be there. So it's just a weird argument to me that, well, we legalized the two worst drugs there are, so we better not legalize the safest one. That makes no sense whatsoever. If it was the other way around, you'd have an argument. Well, we legalized mushrooms and weed, but we better not legalize alcohol and tobacco because those fuckers are dangerous. Right? That might make some sense. But no, we legalized tobacco and alcohol, so we better not legalize mushrooms and weed. Oh, my God. Fear. So let me get to some of his arguments because these are some classics. We already covered the one, we could have banned alcohol if only we'd have gotten to it sooner. Doggone it. If only there was a Project Sam back in 10,000 BC when they were first turning bread into beer. They were first figuring that out. If only we could have just told Ook and Mug, the cavemen there, that it was bad for their brains. It would cause loss of IQ, domestic violence, and make them wreck their wheel. Maybe we could have stopped it back then in its tracks, but no, it's far too late now. Here's the next one. This is the oh, that was the same one. Hold on. Oh, yes. The one about the hood. We've got to keep marijuana illegal to protect the hood. This is the argument that they say, well, alcohol preys on the inner city, preys on disadvantaged Black and Latino people. If you go to the inner cities, why, there's 8 times as many liquor stores in the inner cities as there are in Beverly Hills or Orange County or Upper East Side or wherever, Tony Rich place you want to name, right? Well, that ignores a whole bunch of racism that has nothing to do with alcohol. It ignores the fact that there's zoning laws that say where you can have a liquor establishment, and many of those zoning laws prevent you from having liquor stores in nice, rich, acculturated neighborhoods. Forces the liquor dealers to be more in these residential areas where the poorer, blacker, and browner people are living. Number 2, liquor store sometimes is the only place where alcohol is available to people in the inner city because they're not available at the local restaurant, local grocery store, local tavern, local bar that don't exist as often in those areas. But even granting that there could be a predatory aspect to alcohol to go after people who are disadvantaged, even if we grant that, and I will, when you look at cigarette brands, there's specific cigarette brands like Kools, right? Menthols that are marketed specifically to Black people, and specific alcohol, Colt 45 and Old English marketed specifically to Black people in inner cities and such. There's no denying that. But even granting that for big alcohol makes us wonder what would be the problem with that happening with marijuana in the neighborhoods. If the argument is that, oh my God, if we legalize marijuana, why they're going to set up more pot shops in the black neighborhoods than they will in the white neighborhoods, you got to ask the people in the black neighborhoods, well, how does that compare to who's selling pot in your neighborhood now? See, this is the problem. And like, if you can't remember all of my clever acronyms and funny debunks and various fallacies that I identify, you only need to remember one question. And that is, how does it compare to prohibition now? How does it compare to the situation now? If you want to be more blanket statement about it, how does it compare to the situation now? Oh no, there might be stores selling pot in black neighborhoods, creating jobs, putting the pot behind closed doors where IDs are checked, where there's some measure of video security, probably more video security there than in most areas of town. And how does that compare to the situation now where there's street corner dealers every block who are hustling to the sides of cars that are coming in from out of the neighborhood, passing a bag of weed in and out of the car, exchanging it for money, occasionally getting into shooting fights with other dealers in the neighborhood as you battle over turf or any other sort of dispute? Gee, I wonder, given the choice between the street corner dealers who are shooting up the place or the pot shop that's creating jobs and paying taxes in that neighborhood, I wonder what those residents might want to prefer. I wonder what they'd like better. I wonder if maybe the jobs and the tax paying and the buildings with lighting and security, I wonder if that might be attractive to them. It's such a paternalistic, condescending type of argument. We've got to keep marijuana illegal to protect the black folks from themselves. Why, they'll just set up pot shops all over those black neighborhoods. The next thing you know, those black people, they'll be smoking pot. As if we're not already, as if the people who want to smoke pot in those neighborhoods are not already. Here's what we found from legalizing pot. People that want to smoke pot have been smoking pot. And once it's legal, they smoke a little more pot because now they got access to it and it's cheaper. And some people who used to smoke pot back in the day might try it again now. And a few of them stick with it, and some of them it's just kind of novelty. And for the younger people who've always had access to pot, there's a slight spike in the beginning, but it levels back out to just about who was smoking pot in the past. Really, what's changing in the states where it's legal is middle-aged guys like me have a place to buy pot now. That's really what it is. Middle-aged guys from their 40s on up into the baby boom era, 50s and 60s and 70s even, have got a safe place to go buy weed that's tested and labeled and lots of variety. The college kids and younger who are smoking pot, they've got a guy. They've got the same hookup they've been using for a couple years now. They've got an informal network of friends that constitutes what we call the black market, and they've been getting their weed there. Access couldn't have gotten any better for young people than what it was. We saw that survey, the Monitoring the Future survey, Monitoring the Future since 1975, asked high school seniors, if you wanted to get a hold of weed, would it be easy, fairly easy, not easy, impossible? And since 1975, over 40 years now, they have over 80% of them have said it would be easy or fairly easy to get weed. 4 out of 5 high school seniors, easy or fairly easy to get weed. This year, the most recent year surveyed, I should say, for the first time ever that they asked the question, that number was below 80%. Now, it was 79.5. So it wasn't a whole lot below 80%, but it was the lowest ever recorded. And we've legalized in 4 states. So yeah, the access couldn't have gotten any better. But for older people over 50, monthly marijuana use has tripled among that age group. It's the fastest growing demographic of cannabis consumers.
I spent the last 2 years of high school in a daze.
Well, who didn't, Mr. President? Who didn't? That sound means that it's 4:20 here on the West Coast. And I've got me a perfectly legal joint in my hand, overlooking a perfectly legal state, looking at a perfectly legal mountain. If I wanted to, I could climb the top of that mountain and smoke a joint. Legally. I won't, but I could.
Seed to sale, clicks to conversions, and more. You're listening to the Cannabis Radio Network.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
It's time for cannabis facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
Get the latest updates on the Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking the Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, firedupLawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email firedupLawyer@gmail.com.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Yes, yes. Welcome back, everyone. 23 after the hour. Still enjoying this legal joint. Yeah. Hope you had a good safety briefing as well. We got some great guests coming up on the Russ Belville Show for the rest of this week. I hope you join us. Tomorrow on the show, a special edition of our Reformers Reader segment. Vincent Medizadeh of Huma Rising is a new book that he has sent me a copy of. Interesting story, kind of a rags to riches story. And we'll tell you all about that on the show tomorrow. And then on Thursday's show, another edition of Cops Say Legalize Drugs. We'll have a Great Leap speaker on the air to talk about how they came to realize the war on drugs was a abysmal failure. And then on Friday, Kevin McCormick will be joining us on the show. So we got plenty of guests coming up. Plus, tomorrow morning, there is a special press conference call, a conference call, I guess, news conference call, whatever they're calling it. An online conference call with Canadian and Mexican officials leading up to the United Nations General Assembly special session that's taking place in a couple weeks. And I'll be listening in on that call and may have some audio for you tomorrow of some of these officials and their perspective on the upcoming session. So that's all coming up on the rest of this week's Russ Belville Show. Also coming up on Cannabis Radio, don't forget on Wednesdays and Fridays, we've got the Stoner Jesus Show that comes to you live on the stream at 5 o'clock Pacific time. And then tomorrow night, Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock Pacific time, the new edition of the Tommy Chong podcast. Now, we've been talking about Reefer Madness rhetoric. We've been talking about some of the prohibitionist talking points, their rhetorical fallacies. And this was brought to me by a Twitter account called 2 is Enough DC 2014. It's at TIE DC 2014. And it's always funny when I get in these Twitter battles with prohibitionists, right? Because most of them don't have much of a following. This guy, 2 is Enough DC, has 69 followers. Right? 69. Now, this is... I'm not saying this to brag necessarily. There's plenty, Kardashians have millions of followers, right? I'm nothing special, but I do have almost 18,000 followers. So when I get into these Twitter battles with some of these prohibitionists that have their 90 some odd followers, and then I start hitting them, and my 18,000 people start reading it, some of my 18,000 start hitting them. And they get more traffic in a day than they're used to for in a month, right? So some of my friends online here have been piling on this poor guy. It's always fun to do that. But the last little fallacy that he left us with, this one, very popular among their people, is to try to minimize what they are actually calling for, and that is to keep prohibition. But they want to be the kinder, gentler drug warrior. They want to appear to not be rabid, reefer mad, lock them up and throw away the key prohibitionists. And it's a meme that I call the "we know locking up stoners is politically unpopular. Can we keep non-jail punishments compromise?" And I have to come up with a wittier name for it. Maybe just, can we keep prohibition light? How's that, right? And it's been popularized by Kevin Sabet because Sabet's not an idiot. He's misguided. He's completely deluded in some ways. But he's a smart enough person to be able to read polls and to be able to read the nation's pulse to recognize that the war on drugs is unpopular. It's not a matter of whether it works or not. War on drugs works great. Don't believe anybody that tells you the war on drugs is a failure. It's not. War on drugs is an amazing success if you understand what they're succeeding in doing. Right? You got to understand that the war on drugs, as was revealed in the Harper's cover story and has been known by many of us for decades now, the war on drugs was created to destabilize the left. It was created to undermine black power and hippie power movements of the 1970s. That's exactly its stated purpose. Now, it's grown beyond that stated purpose in protecting pharmaceutical profits, big oil profits, timber profits, all sorts of companies who'd be threatened by industrial hemp and freely available cannabis medicines and recreational pot, right? Brewers and the beer industry and a lot of people benefit from keeping this war on drugs going, or at least not protesting it so much so that it can continue to go, right? So Sabet and these guys, they recognize it's unpopular. You can't be the guy who says, "Nah, they are public enemy number one. We need to lock them up. Jails, we'll build more jails," right? That you can't do it anymore. Can't get away with that. So how do you get what you want without seeming like you're asking for what you want? This was the original point of the war on drugs, right? We couldn't criminalize people for being black or having long hair, but criminalize heroin and weed and associate it with the people that are black or have long hair. Then you could undermine them that way with the drug laws, right? So we've got that kind of situation going on now where we're able to undermine and criminalize people through marijuana prohibition. So they know that they can't say lock them up, throw away the key anymore. So they've come back with what I call the kinder, gentler drug war. This is the Goldilocks proposition. The Goldilocks proposition that prohibition is too hard. Locking people up, throw away key, that's too hard. But legalizing it's way too soft. And our plan is just right. And here's what their plan is. And it comes to us in the form of the Twitter response from Two Is Enough DC, who said, "Who said anything about a cage? No one should be caged, but removing criminal penalties does not equal legalization." So it's their idea that we're just going to remove the criminal penalties. We're not going to punish people with a criminal record. We're not going to lock them up in a cage, but we're still going to slap their hands. We're going to punish them. We're still going to punish them. And that's the key to this, is keeping them on that. Keep reminding everyone within earshot that their goal is to keep punishing adults who use marijuana. Now, that punishment might just be a fine with no arrest and no increase for subsequent violations and no searches. It might be the lightest punishment. It might be Washington, D.C.'s $25 public toking ticket. It might be the lightest punishment ever, but there'll still be punishment. We must still punish you for marijuana. And that's at the heart of this. Can we still keep non-jail punishment? And this is where we as legalizers have to keep attacking the core of their argument. And that is, to protect public safety, we must punish adults who use marijuana. Do what you can to get them to agree to that phrase, to point the argument in that direction. Whenever I talk to a Ben Court or a Kevin Sabet or Randy Philbrick or whoever this Tide DC guy is, that's where I always take it. You're arguing that to keep society safe, you need to punish me for smoking pot. And I always like to make it personal, too, because I got kind of a special case that I get to use against them. I'm like the magic bullet that defeats any of their talking points. They can't pull what about the children on me because I don't have any kids. They can't pull smoff on me, stone mayhem on the freeways, because I don't own a car. I take public transportation everywhere I go. You can't pull workplace productivity on me because A, I'm more productive than most people I know, and B, I'm my own boss. I'm not harming anybody's workplace. Hey, if I take the day off tomorrow, the only person it hurts is me. And you know I won't take the day off tomorrow, right? So none of their arguments work. The healthcare argument doesn't work on me. I'm healthy as a horse. I've just been tested. Everything's good to go. So I always like to keep the argument on me. And why are you punishing me? The other thing about keeping it personal is that it makes them very uncomfortable, right? Because then you've put them in the position of looking like someone who's calling someone else an addict. It made Kevin Sabet real uncomfortable when I pulled that on him. Well, I'm not saying you. I don't know about you, whether you have a... Well, tell me, Kevin. Either I'm an addict with a problem or I'm an adult who can handle this. One or the other, right? Either I'm a threat to society who must be punished in an effort by the government to try to stop me from doing this harmful behavior to society, or not. Or I'm not a harm to society and there's no legitimate reason for government to try to stop me from doing this. Keep it in those terms. They want to portray it as we're helping. We've got to help the poor marijuana consumer. My goodness, no, we don't want to bust a bunch of people. We don't want to lock a bunch of people up, but doggone it, if we happen to find one of you, well, it's our duty to try to help you. Try to get you away from that terrible, terrible habit of yours that's hurting you somehow. Like, I know, it's reducing your IQ. That's it. It's making you not as smart as you could possibly be. And it's our government's fervent wish that you be as smart as you could possibly be. We do everything we can as a government to make sure that you're as intelligent as possible. No, we don't fix schools or update textbooks or pay for college education. But we'll make sure you don't smoke pot and lose 6 IQ points. That's how we're going to make sure that we show how much we care about your brains. And your health. We've got to take care of your health too. You poor pot smoker, we caught you. So what we're going to do is we're going to fine you. We're going to give you a fine for smoking pot. But don't worry, we won't give you a criminal record and we won't lock you up. We're not going to do anything that causes you lasting harm. We're just going to give you a fine so that you know you were a bad person. You're a bad person for smoking pot. And then to help you out, we'll get you some rehab. We'll take you to a rehab and you can be evaluated. We can make sure that you get the help you need. And to make sure that you're participating in the program, we'll just ask for your pee now and then to make sure that you don't relapse. And that's just for your own good. That's just to protect you, because relapse is, for people who are addicts can be very, very difficult. That's just for your own good. We'll do that for you. That's what we want to do to make sure that you're healthy. Not the liquor or the tobacco. That you can have as much of you as you want. Have at it. Smoke your lungs black. Drink your liver pickled. Go for it. Great. Drink more. In fact, everything you see on TV, things that are sold, bought, and coveted will be highly sponsored by that alcohol. We're cool with that. But we care about your health, so don't smoke pot, okay? You want to make sure you don't smoke pot. Think I'm kidding? Think that's hyperbole? Wait till the next segment, and we tell you what senators were saying about marijuana users. Here's a hint. We're not good people. Back in 2.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Every strain, every sale, every medical study. Keep it right here on the Cannabis Radio Network.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
Tommy Chong is ready to cut through the smoke and change the tone of Tilk Radio.
During Dance with the Stars, I started feeling discomfort. Yeah. And not only that, I was doing these old man smells. And it was kind of embarrassing because, all the Dancing with the Stars crew, cast and crew, they were all young kids. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, this old guy would come along and do one of those silent farts, that you don't know you're doing it. Yeah. And all of a sudden you smell, and everybody go, what the hell smells? And, and it was me. And so I'd scurry off to the bathroom, and that's when I knew that there was something wrong.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
And if standing for the Constitution make you a wacko bird, then I am a very, very proud wacko bird.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your cannabis boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your cannabis needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootCamp.com.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everyone. 39 after the hour. And in hour 1 today, we told you about the hearing that took place. Senators Charles Grassley, a.k.a. Chuck Grassley, Yeah, his name is Grassley. By the way, met a great guy, older gentleman, 20 years older than me, 68. And it was so cute because he kept calling it grass. Hey man, you want to smoke some grass? Yeah, man, I want to smoke some grass. You got a 4-finger lid of some grass? Anyway, I just that's just for me. I digress. Chuck Grassley, the Republican from Iowa, and Dianne Feinstein, the Democrat from California, co-chaired a hearing of the Senate caucus on international narcotics control. Now, these two senators couldn't be farther apart on the political spectrum. Chuck Grassley from Iowa, conservative Republican, religious right type of guy. Dianne Feinstein, liberal Democrat from San Francisco, used to be the mayor of San Francisco. But on marijuana, these two, I think Chuck's in his 80s and Diane's in her late 70s, two very old people, couldn't agree more on marijuana. And so they held this hearing. And here's the frustrating thing is that Grassley is the chair of the committee, the Judiciary Committee, to have a hearing on the Carers Act. Now, we've told you about the Carers Act. That's the one sponsored by Rand Paul and Cory Booker. Again, Republican Rand Paul, Democrat Cory Booker. Couldn't be more diametrically opposed on most issues. Lindsey Graham. Freaking Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. The fainting belle of the Senate is behind this bill too. He's co-sponsoring it. Lindsey Graham is co-sponsoring this bill. The Carers Act would basically fix some of the federal problems to allow the states that have legalized medical or recreational marijuana to move forward. Things like banking, things like credit access, is the Carers Act? I think is the one with the veterans, right? Carers Act, yes. Downgrading marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. Ease restrictions on transporting marijuana between states. This way, our medical refugees wouldn't have to be refugees. Make it easier for banks to do business with the marijuana industry. Direct NIDA to broaden access to marijuana for research. Allow VA doctors to recommend medical marijuana. So 5 different things this thing would do. Carers Act. And of course, Grassley won't call a hearing. And this is where you get frustrated with our democratic process, is you realize that a bill that can be supported, a bipartisan group of 18 senators supporting this thing that would get medical marijuana from VA doctors, allow banks to work with legal marijuana states so they don't have to be cash only and invite theft and crime, to allow the CBD oils to be transported across the states so some of these southern states could get it to these epileptic kids. All these things that are supported by a bipartisan group of senators. And a majority of the people in the country can't go anywhere because one guy sits at the head of a committee that won't call it for a hearing. Chuck Grassley, 80-year-old guy holding up this bill. So rather than have a hearing on this bill, he schedules this hearing they had today, which was about how the U.S. isn't really living up to the international anti-drug treaties by allowing Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska to legalize marijuana. And so they call to the hearing Benjamin Wagner, a U.S. attorney from the Eastern District of California, where they still prosecute people federally for low-level pot offenses. Doug Peterson, Nebraska's attorney general, who didn't lose, but his lawsuit went nowhere, at the U.S. Supreme Court. That's when Nebraska is trying to sue Colorado because Colorado legalized, it's making Nebraska's prohibition hard. And Catherine Wells, who's on the advisory board of Project SAM. Yeah, so rather than move forward with the Carers Act, let's instead call a hearing of 3 prohibitionists to speak in front of a committee chaired by 2 prohibitionists. It's frustrating, isn't it? So another member of the caucus was Senator Jeff Sessions, Republican from Alabama. And here's what he had to say about the need to, quote, foster knowledge that this drug is dangerous. You cannot play with it. It is not funny. It is not something to laugh about. And to send the message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana. End quote. Good people don't smoke marijuana. Good people. Not healthy people, not smart people. Good people don't smoke marijuana. So people who do smoke marijuana are evil people. Again, it's a culture war. It's about morality. It's about good and evil. This has nothing to do with whether or not it's healthy or unhealthy, smart or unwise. It's a culture war, and they can't be any more clear when they say things like this. Completely obvious. The Nebraska Attorney General said, quote, "The diversion of marijuana into my state has been fierce. We know that young people in Nebraska are getting the drugs." And by drugs, he means marijuana. "I can tell you story after story of high school students gathering up their money and sending a buyer into Colorado and bringing marijuana edibles back or bringing the product back." End quote. Well, let me fill you in on something. You could tell that story before Colorado legalized. Colorado's always been a supply state for Nebraska. People have always been growing weed in Colorado, and people from Nebraska have always been putting their money together to send a guy over to Colorado to get it. This has always existed. The only difference now is when the guy gets the money and goes across the state line to get the weed in Colorado, he's an adult who's getting his ID checked, and when he's purchasing these items, there's some tax revenue that's benefiting the state of Colorado, and the items he's purchasing have been tested for pesticides, mold, mildew, contaminants. They're labeled with the exact THC content on them, and there's guides for the consumption of these items in a safe manner. I'm not saying it's good that teenagers in Nebraska are getting weed, but given that they're going to get weed, ain't it better that they're getting tested, pure, taxed, regulated weed? But here's the thing. It's not increased, and this has been borne out by the facts. The official federal data between 2012 and 2014, marijuana use, monthly marijuana use declined slightly among Nebraska high school students, although not by a statistically significant amount. So at least it stayed the same. So kids may have been pooling money together to send an adult across the border to get Colorado weed and edibles and bring it back, but not any more than before. Maybe the sourcing has changed. Maybe the quality has improved. Maybe the variety has improved. But no more kids are using marijuana in Nebraska before or after legalization. And then you got Charles Grassley, Chuck Grassley, who has his own thought process with respect to marijuana that it has to be read to be believed. He says, quote, "Our country's in the middle of an epidemic of addiction focused on heroin and prescription opioids. And just last year, the Centers for Disease Control found that people who are addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. So if the Obama administration is serious about addressing this epidemic, it should stop burying its head in the sand about what's happening to its enforcement priorities on recreational marijuana." End quote. Yeah, so we're supposed to buy the idea here that part of what we need to do to address the heroin epidemic is to stop people from smoking pot. Man, I don't even have weed good enough to make me think that kind of stuff. What do they got growing in Iowa that Chuck Grassley's gotten a hold of? See, here's the problem with Chuck Grassley's logic in this respect. The same report that he is referring to from the Centers for Disease Control, the same report says that people who abuse alcohol or prescription pills are also considerably more likely to abuse heroin. So let's stop burying our head in the sand about what's happening on our enforcement priorities on alcohol and prescription pills. No, again, those are legal drugs. We don't have to pay attention to what effect legal drugs have on society. And we've got other research. We talked about it on the show many times. It shows alcohol is really more of a gateway in these circumstances. And we've got other research showing us that medical marijuana access, not just passing a law, but actually having access to the medical marijuana, reduces the fatalities and overdoses associated with heroin and painkiller abuse. The scares from these senators, these prohibitionists, can't work anymore in the age of Google. We can look this shit up. We can actually see with our own two eyes and our own internet connection the government's own statistics that prove these talking points to be massive lies. But that's the hearing we had today. We had senators hearing from prohibitionists talking as if it were still the 20th century, as if we still had no Google or Facebook, no easy way to access this information. As if it were still pre-1996 and we hadn't actually seen states pass medical marijuana and not fall into the chasm of hellfire and damnation. We've seen it with 23 states now in varying degrees of permissive, like California, to restrictive, like Illinois or New York or Minnesota, from whole plant to CBD only, from decrim to full legalization. We've seen various experiments with marijuana policy in the United States, and every single one of them has been superior to the prohibition status quo. It's not in question anymore. It's not whether we should legalize, it's just how should we legalize at this point. Fortunately, Charles Grassley and Dianne Feinstein won't be around much longer to have to get in the way. Not that I wish anything bad to happen, but, you know, stats and all.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
We have your smoking section right here. This is the Cannabis Radio Network.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time for marijuana sales to take place in regulated businesses
and stop taking place in our neighborhoods.
It's time to create rules for testing and labeling marijuana so that consumers can know what they're getting.
Prohibition has failed.
It's time for a more sensible approach.
Vermont is ready.
We're ready.
We're ready.
Vermont is ready.
It's time to end prohibition and regulate marijuana in Vermont.
Marijuana is not addictive, but listening to the Russ Belville Show is.
Are you playing an acoustic guitar but want to be louder without an amp? Try a resonator guitar. The Fingerboard Extension has National Resophonic and other resonators, square necks and round necks. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. Go wild hog in the woods.
Warning, hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that. This is Dan Michaels from danmichaelsaudio.com, and you're listening to Radical Russ on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Just a few minutes left here as we close up shop. Reminding you to stay tuned to CannabisRadio.com for more informative programming that will be on replay after I close down this live stream. But as we close down the live stream, one last story coming to us from the Associated Press, and we are working with the Associated Press, so I get to bring you these stories. Convicted killer okayed for Washington retail pot license. A story out of Seattle here. A report about a convicted murderer being granted a license to open a marijuana shop in Washington has prompted a double take by state officials. The Washington Liquor and Cannabis Board selected Green Grotto LLC to open a marijuana store in the Seattle suburb of Issaquah. As first reported by the Issaquah Press, the company is run by George Garrett, who pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for killing his wife and dumping her body in Hood Canal in 1993. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Board spokesman Brian Smith says Garrett disclosed the conviction on his application for a marijuana retail license. Under the board's rules, the felony did not automatically disqualify him because it was more than 10 years old. Smith says the case raised a flag and that the board will be discussing whether further action is warranted. Well, I'm betting he won't get the license now that the stories come out, but it's an interesting point here. It's like, does killing someone disqualify you for selling marijuana? Well, folks, I am not going to rule on that yet, but I am going to rule on this. Guy got 13 years for killing his wife and dumping her body, and he gets a marijuana retail license. But someone like Jeff Mazansky or Robert Platshorn, who each served more than 20 years in prison for weed, can't get a license? How's that work again? Sorry, thinking out loud. That's all the time I got for today. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back live from Portland tomorrow. Make sure you join us at 3 p.m. Pacific time on CannabisRadio.com. For everyone here, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed.